Hello everybody in the wonderful Dynamics community, and hello everybody in the D365 jams. So this is the edition 3 of Dynamics 365 Power Mantra or D365 Power Mantra. So what did we do in the earlier two editions? So if you want to look at that, the links are in the description. The first edition we talked about upskilling. In the second edition we talked about designing in the unified client interface. What are we going to cover in this particular edition? This particular edition we are going to talk about Power Control Framework 101 or PCF 101, and then we are going to build the actual PCF. So let's quickly get into action now. Power Apps Control Framework PCF 101. So we are going to now go through the introduction of the Power Apps Control Framework, and then we will deep dive into developing one, which is the Twitter timeline control, which you saw a sneak peek video of last week. So what we are going to do, we are going to do the introduction to the Power Control Framework. We are going to cover main code components involved, manifest, component implementation library, what are the methods inside, resources before you develop your first PCF, what is the prerequisite, and demo on how to build the Twitter timeline control. If you are really just interested in the demo, you can really move forward on this particular video. However, I will recommend you to first go through the introduction, which is very good. It will save you time, and I had taken a lot of this reading from Microsoft Docs site and other blogs which are available in the community to summarize this particular set of slides. So you can utilize that to understand the basics of Power Control Framework very quickly, or you can just move forward if you're just really interested in the hands-on. Introduction to the Power Control Framework. So basically this enables professional developers and app makers to create code components that can be used across full breadth of Power Apps capabilities. You can even reutilize this component across different entities and set of fields. You can bundle your HTML, CSS, then you have a choice. You can either use TypeScript or you can use JavaScript file into a single solution package file. And don't confuse this with the package or any other component. We are specifically talking about the PCF component. Then you can utilize the modern web practices and harness the power of external libraries as well to create really some advanced and cool user interactions. At this stage, there is support for both model and Canva. Canva support is just starting, but there is support for both kinds of apps that are available with the Power Platform or Power Apps. What are the main code components that are involved? Manifest. Manifest is the metadata file that defines a component. So we are going to talk about that shortly. It's basically an XML document. What is a component implementation library, or in short, they are terming it nowadays as CIL. It is basically the code component that must have a library, which includes the definition of a function, which returns the object that implements the method described in the code component interface. So what does that mean? So basically CIL is defining a set of functions which are going to cover the life cycle of your particular PCF component. Resources. Each code component then should have a resource file. This is basically required to create the visualizations. You need to define the resource file in your manifest accordingly. So let's quickly understand what is in the manifest. It's an XML document which describes the namespace and name of your component. It tells about what kind of data it can be configured for, either it is a field or a data set. Then you can also see the properties that can be configured in the application when the component is added. It gives you a list of resource files that the component needs, and it also gives the TypeScript function with the CIL needs that returns the object that applies the required component interface. So we are going to see those what kind of TypeScript function this particular manifest does when we cover the demo. For now, yeah, this is basically the XML document that contains your namespace name. It gives you the type of data. It gives you the properties that can be configured. It can give you the list of resource files that the component needs, and it also gives the TypeScript function that the CIL needs. Next, CIL or Component Implementation Library. This is one of the key steps when you are developing a code component using the Power App Component Framework or PCF. So what does this particular part of the Power App Control Framework or PCF does? This basically does implement 4 important methods which control the lifecycle of your component. What are those 4 important methods? They are init, update view, get outputs, and destroy, out of which init, update view, and destroy are required methods, whereas get outputs is the only optional method which you do not require at all the times. So what is the init method used for? This is used to initialize the component instruments. For example, whenever the component is going to be initialized, this is the particular method that will be triggered. You can kick off remote server calls and other initialization actions in this particular method. Update view. This particular method will be called when any value in the property bag has changed. This includes, for example, field value, data sets, global values like height and weight, offline status, and metadata values such as you are changing the label or visibility, etc. Every time something like that triggers, update view will be called for. Get outputs. It is called by the framework prior to a component receiving some new data. It returns an object based on the thing that you have defined in your manifest. So this is again optional. Only when you're passing some data onto your component, that's when you'll require get outputs. Destroy, as the name suggests, this is invoked when the component is being removed from the DOM tree. You use it only for the cleanup and release any memory that the component is using. So this is basically you can compare init to a constructor, whereas you can compare a destroy method to a destructor. However, I will not suggest that you completely go with that analogy. That's just for your understanding. An update view is kind of whenever your particular events are changing, field values are changing, data set values are being changed, or some things like height, width, or label is being changed. Resources. The resources node in the component manifest refers to the resource file that the component will require to implement its visualization. So some examples of a child elements in the resource files are code, CSS, IMG, HTML, and RESX file. So if you want some code and you want to refer to the path where the resource files are located, that's the child element code. CSS describes how the code components will be displayed. So any CSS related one you can give in the CSS node. IMG is for any image web resource allowed which you are adding to your code components. HTML, use HTML web resources to create user interface for client extension. That is the one you can use in the HTML. And RESX is basically used to manage any localized strings you define. So if you have any localized strings, that's the one you will be passing in the RESX component. What do you need before you develop your first PCF? First of all, Visual Studio 2017 is a recommended one. Then we need to install npm. So there the link is given, https:/nodejs.org/en. Again, we'll see a detailed one when we do the video or the demo. And then you also want to install the Power Apps CLI, which can be downloaded from the link mentioned here. This link will also be mentioned in the description of the video, so you can take it out from there as well, right? So what is next? So that is what we have been waiting for. That is to basically how to build the Twitter timeline control. So let's move into action very quickly, and then we are going to cover how to configure our Twitter timeline control. Step 1, it is to do installation of node.js. So you have to basically go to this URL nodejs.org-en and you will get this web page. So we have to basically download the x64 Windows version 12.10.0. This is the current as of today with the latest features. So I've already done this download, so I'm just going to open up a folder which already has the downloaded version, and then I'm just going to run this. Once I run this, it is going to ask me for the standard stuff. I accept the terms in the license agreement. It's going to ask for the path. I will default it to the path that it has. I am not going to automatically install the other necessary tools. I just need the runtime, and then I'm going to click on install. This is going to ask me for the permission for install, validate my install, generate some other things, copy some new files in, which is the standard to any installation, and update this component registration. So I'm just going to wait for this to finish. This normally takes less than a minute on my Surface device. So this can vary depending on the machine that you're using. I'll let it complete, and we'll continue from that step. So once this is done its installation, you'll get a screen like this one. To complete the setup wizard, you can just click on finish and you are done here. So that's the step 1 done. Okay, so let's talk about step 2. So in step 2, you have to basically install the Power Apps CLI. So how do I do that? You pick the link which is mentioned in the description and just copy this into your browser. That will prompt to download. In my case, this is already downloaded, so I'm not going to do it all over again. But yeah, basically that is what you need to download. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to install this. So here I have Power Apps CLI already downloaded, so I'm just going to run this. And again, this is going to run a setup. I have to accept my terms of the license agreement and click on install. This is relatively faster, and you will see that the different packages are going to get installed now. I'll again wait for those packages to be installed, and then you will see this message of successfully installed, and we'll wait for this to be completed. Once it is completed, you will see the screen which is complete the Microsoft Power Apps CLI and finish. Step 3 is to launch the developer command prompt. So where do I find it? I'll just click on my run in Windows, and then I'll find for develop. If I just type developer command prompt for VS, I'm going to get this. I'm going to run this as an administrator. Next, I'm going to point this to the folder where I want to set up my PCF code component project. So right now it is defaulting to the source, but I don't want to use that one. So I'm just going to navigate it to C drive/PCF. And here I am. Next is what is the step required to create your component. So that step is PAC space PCF space init, then followed by namespace where you can give your namespace name, and then your component name followed by the template type. What is a template type? Basically, there are two kinds of template types. One is the field type, which we are going to use in the Twitter timeline control, and you can also use one for data set. So this is the command that I need to use, and I'm going to just type it in so that it is more clear. I'm just going to say PAC PCF init hyphen namespace sample hyphen name Twitter feed control, and followed by two hyphens for template type, and then say field, and just put it on. This is going to take some time, and this is going to install the component. So I'm just going to let it do it. Successfully created in the C drive PCF. So let me just quickly move to that folder, what happened on that folder. So if you see here, apart from my setup files, which I'm just quickly going to clear up now, which I don't need, it just created a Twitter feed control folder, and then it also created some other file types here, including tsconfig, pcfconfig, and package. So we are going to now next see how to utilize this particular one. Step 4, this is installed now. So it's mentioning itself that be sure to run npm install in the directory to install the project dependencies. So I'm just going to type in npm install. Now this step does take some time, guys, so it can take up to 5 minutes depending on your machine configuration. So I'm just going to run it, and then we are going to move forward. So I'm just going to let it run and start the installation. However, I'm also going to let it go forward, and we'll restart from the point where this is completed. All right, so once the npm install step is done, you will get this message, something similar to add this packages from all the contributors, and then you're going to get the folder with another additional set of folder, which is the node underscore module. You'll see that being added over here. So what I have to do next, I have to just take the folder path here, and then I'm going to navigate to my Visual Studio 2017 screen. I'll click on open folder, and then point to my PCF and just say select folder. So that's the next step that I will do. I'll let this open. So once the project is loaded, you should see something similar to this, and we are going to continue forward from here on the code bits now. Before we again move into code, there is one small thing that we need to do in order to do the Twitter timeline. So we are going to use one of the React widgets for this. So we need to go to the developer command prompt for VS 2017, which we have been using. So I just cleared the screen so that we can do it from scratch, and then going to install one of the React widgets, which we are going to utilize in our particular PCF component. So here's the command which I would mention. Every time you have to install some external library into our particular project which is provided by React or any other open source library, we can use npm install followed by the one which we want to use. So right now we are going to use React widgets. So I'm just going to say npm install followed by React -widgets and leave it for installation. Once this is done, we'll continue on. So now our particular React widget is installed. So we'll continue on to the code after this one. Okay, so in order to speed things up, you can download the particular code component from the shared OneDrive. This will shortly be available into GitHub as well. But for now, you can just use the download link in description to download the component file or solution file and paste it into your appropriate PCF folder, and then open the folder to get this solution explorer working. So what's the file which is currently open? This is the control manifest file, and here you can see that there's a property name that has been mentioned as Twitter property, which is of single line.text field bound, and it's a required one. So this is the property which is being described. Similarly, you can see under resources section that you have a code file which is index.ts, and then you also have a CSS path for the Twitter feed control over here. So that's the things that are available in your manifest file. You have basically your resources. You can also see your different kinds of properties that you define. It's XML file. What's available in your index.ts file? In index.ts file, in this particular one, you will see a lot more. So whenever you want to import certain custom third-party libraries that you're using, you will use the import keyword and then import them in. But that's not where we are going to start first. So there's an empty constructor over in this one, and you can clearly see this implements a component framework.standard control, which is an interface. So in this interface, you need to override certain methods, as we had seen in the presentation earlier as well. One of them is init. So init is the method which is called initially, and then we have done some kind of code into this, and you can see that the container is being built with the document.create element. So we're creating a div and binding certain data from the property into this particular div element container, and then appending the child over there. Then you have a method which is the update view. Update view is used typically when you are trying to refresh or any property bag value has changed or certain height and width parameters have changed. Get outputs is optional, but in our case we are using the get outputs to set the Twitter property to the Twitter ID. So get outputs again is an optional field. If you want to pass data between your component and elsewhere, then yes. In our case, we are not using anything in the destroy method. So I hope this is giving you a clear high-level idea of the structure of this particular code file. Rest of the things we are not going to discuss in the 101 session, but I am going to do some subsequent sessions to go detailed into each kind of components later. So this is where you can just download the file and explore your index.ts file as well as the control manifest file. Next step is to how to generate a build for this particular one. Again, we have to go to the developer command prompt for our particular folder and say npm run build. This is going to trigger a build for this particular component. So now I'm just trying to build this particular component. So this will trigger a build and initialize, and then takes some seconds to a minute to run this. If there are any errors, you will notice it here itself, and during compiling or any other step, this is going to give you a thing in red and you're not going to be able to continue from this step. So once your build is generated, you will see a succeeded message similar to this one. The next step is to try and run this particular component, right? So that's what we are going to do next. So in order to run this component, we have to follow a command which is npm start. So I'm going to trigger that, and that will start my component over here. So you can see that the PCF component and the scripts are being loaded over here. So once you launch that command, your browser is going to open up with this particular component, and here is where you see that there are some, by default we set this to val. So if I override this to something else, which is ms dynamics blocked, and trigger a change, this is going to load my blog handle over here. So you can see that this particular component is now loading this particular tweets that have been recently passed on to me by my Twitter ID, right? And so that means that our component is running successfully. Next step is to take it into the CRM solution, right? Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to stop the running control. So for that, you can come back to your npm and press Ctrl C, which will pop you up for a terminate batch job. I will say yes and say enter. So this is my particular component done. So next we are trying to generate a solution file which we can import into Dynamics 365. First step we have to do is we have to put a command in, which is PAC solution init publisher name, Twitter feed, and publisher prefix dyna. So depending on what publisher name and prefix you want to choose, you can pick this particular command. Now be very careful with this step. Earlier this used to be called custom prefix and this used to be called publisher name. So you might face error if you're not referring to the documentation properly. And over here, if I copy this in, this is going to basically create the particular one, and it's going to say CDS solution project with name solution output created successfully, and then I have to follow in the next command, which is to add a reference. So the reference path should always point to your PCF folder. So I'm adding the reference over here. So next is I'm just going to get this reference going, and this should say successful as well. So this is added successfully to the CDS solution project. Next command that we have to give to generate the file is called msbuild t restore, and the other after that which we have to do is msbuild. So here's the command. So I'm just going to say msbuild -t restore, which is going to just run the particular zip file which is going to be generated, and then after that we have to use the command msbuild. So we'll just wait for this one to finish first. So if you can see that the project build has started and the build is succeeded, you will see that message in green over here. So the last step is to trigger msbuild, which is just this step. Once we generate this, the directory will be created and the output zip file for the solution will be created for us, right? So just be cautious again on this step. If you don't have the latest version of .NET, which is 4.6.2, this is going to give you error as well, and this particular step will not work for you. So I'm waiting for this to complete and we'll see what we need to do after this step. Okay, so now our build has succeeded. So once the build is succeeded, you will see that the same particular solution zip file solution output is available over here. Now this can be imported into Dynamics 365 directly. So this solution output file we have generated is basically an unmanaged version. Alright, so there is only one part that we have left over in this one. So the generated solution output file, you can import that solution in. That will basically get your control into Dynamics 365. The next step is you see the account form customization directly open over here. So if I just open this particular text field that we have created called Twitter. So once your solution is in, you can always go into controls and you can see the Twitter feed control here is available. So this will only be available once you've successfully imported the solution in. We called it Twitter feed control, and that's the way you can save and publish this control. Next, see this in action. So here I have the MS Dynamics blog account entity opened up and the Twitter timeline control. So if I click on the Twitter timeline tab, you can clearly see that the Twitter timeline for MS Dynamics blog is completely loaded over here, right? So I hope you are able to utilize this particular concepts of PCF control, how to build it, and the timeline and the basics with this video clearly. Definitely we didn't go deep diving into the actual code of the Twitter timeline control. However, the idea here was to understand the entire process. You can always refer to the code and reach me back if you have any queries. Thank you for watching this video. I hope this really helped you with your first PCF. If not, it at least helped you understand PCF better. If you have any of the needs on Dynamics 365, Power Platform, Field Service, or PSA, please get in touch with Dynamicity and Power 365 as usual, guys. Thank you.